G'day ladies and gentlemen, Scotty D here from the Australia's Tabletop Wargaming Network, and welcome in to our series From Sprue to Tabletop. Alrighty ladies and gentlemen, so for our next installment of our From Sprue to Tabletop series, we are going to be working on finishing off this Assault Intercessor and getting the basing done on it, and showing you how to go about applying basing material, as well as what you can do to really not just have the basing material on the base, but to really spice it up, add some life to it, and add some additional materials on the top of it as well. But before we jump into the hobbying side of things, I want to thank everyone who has been checking out the content we have been creating here on the YouTube channel this year, as well as checking out the tournament games and the tournament coverage that we've been providing to the Australian Southeastern Seaboard. But as we jump into working on the basing, you can do a variety of different materials when it comes to putting materials on your basing. You could just do straight static grass if you wanted to. You could just do straight modeling sand. And so I'm going to show you my process on how I go about doing the basing on my Space Marines for my Champions of Salvation chapter, and we're going to walk through that process from start to finish. So let's jump over to the hobby desk and get into it. Alrighty everyone, so as I did mention at the start of the video, we're going to do the basing for the Assault Intercessor, which is now fully painted. He's ready to go for his basing, and we're going to get that started here today. So really straight off the bat, the basing can be as simple as just putting some sand on the base and not painting it and just leaving it that way. Or you can do a whole bunch of different things. You could use texture paste or some of the texture paint from Games Workshop, then paint over it and dry brush it up if you want to. But I'm going to show you really straightforward and simple basing technique that I've been using the entirety of my hobbying. So we're going to grab an older GW brush that I still have, that I mainly use for when I'm using PVA glue. And that's what we're going to be working with when we are going to be putting some of the old Citadel sand onto the base. Now you can use any basing material from, say, Woodland Scenics or Gale Force 9 or a bunch of different other brands that do kind of modeling sand as well. I'm preferable to the old Citadel sand for my Marines and my Death Watch, but I do use the Woodland Scenics Battlefield, the different granularity basing for my Necrons. So I'll show you how to do that style of basing as well when we get to doing a Necron for this series, to show you how to do like metallic tinting and such. So we're just going to pull off the top. We've got, not much left in here, but still enough that we can cover a lot of Marines with it. Now I am using PVA glue out of an old sweet chili sauce bottle. I do love me some sweet chili. And so we're just going to put a small amount out. We don't need a massive amount of PVA glue for this. And we're just going to grab our miniature and just put the brush into the PVA glue, and we just want to make sure that it's got enough covered that it's actually going to solidify it's going to adhere the basing material to it. Now this will take a little bit to dry, so we won't actually be painting it in this step, but you can see that we do need a lot of PVA glue, so the amount that we got out was probably the right amount. And we're just going to work it around and get the PVA glue all done. Alright, so we've probably got a solid amount of PVA glue on that basing now. Probably have a little bit too much that's kind of gathered around the back of there, and then we also want to make sure that there's enough kind of covering that section. We wanted to make sure that there is enough covering the edges of the base as well, without it spilling over to the sides of the base. So now that we have applied our PVA glue, we're just going to pop him in. And now the technique I like to use when we do it is just grab him and just slightly dig it in, rotate the model around, make sure it's all covered, and then just lightly shake off the basing material. Then flip him upside down directly over where the basing material is, and just give it a light tap on the base. What this will do is that if there's any loose basing material, it'll actually just remove it from the base. And then there is a little bit still caught on the actual inside of the base. We'll make sure we get rid of that as well. It's probably just leftover residue from the blue tack. And so we have now got the basing material down onto the base for this Assault Intercessor, and now we're going to leave it overnight, and we are going to come back to it tomorrow, and we're actually going to paint it up as well. Alright, so now, as I said, we have got the basing material fully glued onto the base of this Assault Intercessor, and it is dried and it's ready to go. Now, you could leave it at this. You could just leave the basing material as it looks, the black rim on the base, and that is perfectly fine. It's considered then based at that point. However, we're going to work on adding some color to it. We're going to add some depth, and we're going to add some static grass to really make it pop as well. Now, we're going to paint the base rim as well, which I know can be a contentious issue. Some people prefer leaving the base rims black. Some prefer having it painted the same color as the basing. My personal preference is to make it match the base coat color that you're doing for your basing. That way, if it's a black base coat, you've got black rims. If it's a brown base coat, you've got brown rims, etc. So it does kind of cohesively tie the model fully together. So we're going to jump over the hobby desk, and we are going to get started on painting the basing as well as adding that static grass once we've finished painting the basing for the Assault Intercessor. Alrighty everyone, so now that our basing material has dried on the Assault Intercessor, we are now ready to actually paint it. And we're going to do a couple of different stages when it comes to painting the basing, but the first stage is we're actually going to use Mournfang Brown Air. Now, you might be thinking, why are you using an airbrush paint to do basing? The answer is relatively simple. Because the air paint is already pre-thinned, it means that when you're going to actually apply it onto a base, that you don't actually have to thin down traditional Mournfang Brown in this case, and you're just going to be able to just put that down in your wet palette or in a receptacle if you don't want to put it on your wet palette, and then just apply it. And even just with one solid brush load, and this is just from putting it on the wet palette, this isn't from even just getting a fresh lot on, it already covers a lot further along the sides of the basing as well. So you can see we may go through a little bit of this to get into all the little areas, but I find that this is also a lot better on this style of basing, on the modeling sand, because it allows you to actually get the paint down into the recesses of it as well, and not just the tops. So I'm just going to keep on going around and getting the first coat of the basing painted. Alrighty, so with that first coat done on the Assault Intercessor's basing, we're going to leave it, we're going to let it dry for a little while, and then when we come back, we are going to see if it needs another coat, but if it doesn't, we will then do the dry brushing to get the different tones on the modeling sand as well. Alrighty everyone, so now that we have let the first base coat of the basing dry, we are just going to do a little bit of a quick check just to make sure it's got full coverage by using the air paint. Sometimes it does leave pockets, and so we just want to make sure that the basing is fully covered, which by looks it is, and so it means we're ready to go for the next stage of the basing. So we are going to be working on adding two different dry brushing layers onto the basing. We're going to be doing, first color is going to be Balor Brown for the first layer, and then Ushapti Bone as the second layer. Then we're going to work with Mournfang Brown base to repaint the rim of the base as well. So for the dry brushing, we are going to be using a large Citadel base coat brush, which I've been using for dry brushing for such a long time. So we're going to start off with this Balor Brown. We're going to get a whole bunch of it out of the pot onto our wet palette, and then we are going to get into doing some dry brushing. Now, very similar to how we did the dry brushing on the plasma pistol in the plasma glow effect, we're going to do the same kind of technique here for the basing of this Assault Intercessor. So we're going to grab our large dry brush here, and we're going to get a decent amount of paint onto just the edge of the brush. You don't need to get it right the way on, and then we're going to wipe it off on this paper towel that we've got here ready to go. Not a whole heap off, but we want to get enough, and then you want to kind of brush it over the basing in such a way that it's going to get a nice, good, even coverage over the kind of raised areas on the basing that the sand does create. And over time you're going to need to add more paint, wipe it off, and rinse and repeat the process pretty much until we get the Balor Brown fully covered across a lot of the base to really start to add some depth to the basing on this Assault Intercessor. Now, some of these areas are going to be a bit harder to get into, but that's why we've got the tip of the brush as well. It's going to allow us to get in next to those feet as well, and we're going to be able to get a nice even coverage across the entirety of the base with the Balor Brown, which is looking really good so far. And there we have it. So we've fully finished all of the dry brushing of the Balor Brown onto the basing. It doesn't matter too much if we go over the rims here, because we are going to be painting the rims again. Now we're just going to clean out our dry brush, because you don't want to mix your colors when you're dry brushing. So we're just going to clean it out, and we're going to wipe off all that water as best as possible, and get all of the color as best as we can out of the actual dry brush itself. And we're obviously using that larger area of the paper towel to wipe that off on. However, if you don't want to use a different paper towel than what you're using for your other brushes, then you can use a separate piece of paper towel. Just do not dry it on the paper towel you're using to wipe off your paint on. So now we are also going to grab the Ushapti bone as well. We're going to get that ready to go onto our wet palette to do this next layer of dry brushing. Now we won't need as much, because we're only wanting kind of that top layer of that dry brushing to really get that effect for the basing. And so from this point, we're just going to do the same thing again with our dry brush. We're going to get a whole heap of Ushapti bone on the tip. We're going to wipe it off on the paper towel here, and then we are going to start dry brushing it onto the miniature and getting the Ushapti bone coat done. And there we have it. We have pretty much finished the Ushapti bone dry brushing, and you can see the depth that we have now got in the basing for this Assault Intercessor, even just with just 2 simple layers of dry brushing over that base coat. A really nice effect. And so now we're going to come back through in a second, and we're going to repaint the basing rims. Alrighty, so now we are going to be grabbing our Mournfang Brown basing out of the pot, instead of using the air paint, because the air paint does take 2 different layers when we're wanting to paint the base rims. So we're just going to start off with a nice, strong, solid coat of Mournfang Brown on the base rims. Now, there is a bit of discussion, as I've mentioned in this video, in terms of whether people prefer to have black base rims or you match the basing color and such as well. So with here, we're just matching the basing, the base rim with the base coat color that we did for the actual basing material itself. So we're going to go around and we're going to do a nice solid coat of Mournfang Brown on this base rim, and if we need to do a second coat, we will as well, to have it nice and solidified on here too. Alright, so now that we have finished the first coat on the basing rim, what we're going to do is we're actually going to do a slightly watered down coat of Mournfang Brown over the top, just to solidify the layer of the basing rim. This will give it a nice smooth finish over the top, whilst also removing any streaks that might be occurring in the actual rim itself from applying the paint on there. So we're just going to do that really quickly, and then that will mean that this model is pretty much done. so we are going to now let that sit and dry. However, with that second coat done, once it is dried with the Mournfang Brown, it is going to be good to go. Now, you could count that as being finished if you didn't want to apply any additional basing materials onto your bases, which would mean that this is kind of at a battle ready standard for your basing, but by adding additional materials that we're going to do in the next step, it'll really add a little bit more depth to the actual model, and this does really look great, even just that style as well. So you don't really need to stress too much further if you just want to keep it really simple and just do the sand technique and do that 2 layers of dry brushing over a base coat will be really effective as a choice as well. Alrighty, so now that the base rim has dried on our Assault Intercessor, we're now ready to add some static flock to the base, and I'll show you how I personally go about doing it. So we'll start off by getting our good old sweet chili sauce bottle that is full of PVA glue. I'm just going to clear the top of it, as it does sometimes like to clog up. We're going to put just a little bit, because that's all we need. That should be enough for what we are going to do when it comes to putting on some flock onto this Assault Intercessor. Now you'll notice I don't have it on a base because I don't need it for this one, and we're going to use my dedicated PVA glue brush. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a nice little raised kind of area right here on the base, and just kind of make sure that it's, you know, a decent size, whilst also at the same time looking relatively in place. And we're also going to take it to the edge of the base as well, just so then it kind of frames it a little bit more, makes it look as though it's part of a bigger patch of grass than what it is on the actual base. So now we've got that that PVA glue on there. I do this a little differently to some other hobbyists, because some hobbyists will just go, like we do with the static grass, stick it in and it'll be done. Whereas I actually prefer to get a pinch of the static grass between my fingers, like a decent clump, kind of about that much. And then I actually like to kind of sprinkle it over the top of where the PVA glue is and get it covered more than it needs to be. Then the same way that we did with the sand, we are just going to tap off the excess and wipe any excess off from different areas. Now this will mean that the static grass will actually stand up, and it'll actually look like a proper grass tuft. And there you go. That is the Assault Intercessor now with a parade ready level of basing. Of course, you could put some skulls on there if you wanted to, or some extra bits, but this is what I like to do for my Marines in terms of their basing. And that is going to be it for the From Sprue to Tabletop series in terms of how we've been working on the Assault Intercessor and painting this guy up. It's been a great journey to walk you guys through painting this up as well. And let's have a look at the finished product. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, so that is going to be it for our final video working on the Assault Intercessor for our From Sprue to Tabletop series. Now, we have actually fully completed the Assault Intercessor, which is awesome to see, and I love how all the different elements come together when it comes to basing and also finishing the painting of the miniature as well. It is all done, it is finished, we can pop him in our case, and he's ready to go to be used in our next game if we are running Assault Intercessors in our army list as well, which is really awesome. And I love the look of the Assault Intercessor, and I hope that you guys have learned a lot in terms of painting up just a basic Assault Intercessor and the various techniques we've done on these guys. And I'm excited to jump into working on different techniques for different miniatures as well as we go. So we're going to be jumping into work on a new miniature with a different style of painting that I do for one of my armies that we're going to continue the series with. But as per usual, guys, if you have any feedback on the From Sprue to Tabletop series, feel free to leave it down in the comment section below, or if you enjoyed the video and you don't have any feedback, just leave your favorite emoji. If you want to like the video as well, and if you haven't already, feel free to hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell so you're able to be notified as to when we are releasing more content here on the YouTube channel. And if you have any questions about basing or how to go about different basing techniques, feel free to check us out over on our Twitch channel, where we do hobbying streams, tournament previews, tournament live coverage. And whilst we are doing those hobbying sessions, feel free to ask any questions you have about any hobbying or basing techniques or painting and such there, as well, as I'm always happy to help show and teach others how to develop their own painting skills and basing skills and come up with different techniques and help you guys learn and develop as your own hobbyists. And as well, I want to give a massive shout out to those who support us via our Ko-Fi page or our subscribers on Twitch as well. You guys really do help allow us to continue to create the content that we do, alongside getting to more tournaments across Australia to provide more tournament coverage. And so if you do want to support us via Ko-Fi, the link is down in the description below. You can support us by buying merchandise with a one-off tip if you wish to do so, monthly subscriptions, or you've also got coaching that you can get from myself as well, whether that's gaming or hobbying or just organizing events and running local communities as well. But no pressure to do so as well. It's only if you feel like doing so. Any support you do provide is always greatly appreciated. But ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be it for this video in our From Sprue to Tabletop series. I hope you've enjoyed the process of getting the Assault Intercessor done, and I'm excited to come back when we're ready to continue this series, working on a new miniature and showing you some new painting techniques as well. But that is going to be it for this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.